Today we have Sugandha Deshpande with us talking on street theatre at Jagannath Manch. Thank you for agreeing.
Well, thanks for having me.
To begin with, how would you define for our readers and our audience street theatre as a form?
It's a funny question because we often go to colleges and we meet students who do street theatre. As you know, there's a lot of street theatre activity happening in Delhi University for sure, and a lot of these students go, these groups go to these competitions, and in many of the competitions they have a list of what qualifies for street theatre, and so it's a whole list of do's of don'ts. In other words, your play can't have costumes that are particular to characters. Your play can't be more than a certain length. Well, length you can still understand because it's a time thing, but things like your play can't have a single story. Can you believe that? That the idea is that street theatre is only possible if you're doing episodic things that don't have a single story from beginning to. It can't be like a regular plot. You can't have a plot.
Okay.
Right, where scene 1 something happens to the character, scene 2 whatever, that kind of a plot you can't have, and so on. And I'm always very amused but also exasperated by this. I'm exasperated by the fact that you need to define something purely in terms of what you can't do. And my thinking has been to say, and this is not just it's something that we often talk about in Janam. So it's coming out of our experience in Janam, where we say that, look, who's to tell me what can't be done in street theatre? In fact, it's the opposite. We still haven't reached the frontiers of the form. There are so many things that are possible in street theatre that actually, rather than saying that I can't have lights, I can't have properties, I can't have sets, I can't have costumes, etc., etc., what if I begin by saying that actually the fact that the conditions of street theatre impose upon it certain real not constraints, but that it happens in the real world, which means that you need your play to be mobile, you need it to be flexible, you need it to be able to play in most circumstances and so on. So what do you have? What you have is actually more important, and what you have is you have an open space, you have actors and their bodies and their voices, and most of all what you have is the imagination of the audience. And because you have the imagination of the audience, there's nothing that you can't do. So there's virtually absolutely no limit to what you can show in street theatre, is the way I would approach it. Now, obviously, having said that, it still has to be done in practice. In other words, I might try to do a play in which I'm trying to show a certain situation, and I might fail. You might do another play which has a similar situation and you might succeed. But that has nothing to do with street theatre. That has to do with how creative I am and how creative you are, or what sort of solutions do we find to the problems that we face, and so on. But really, for me, the critical thing is not to define street theatre in terms of form. The critical thing is to link up this form, or not to define it only in terms of form, but to link up the form to the larger political aspect of street theatre. What is street theatre? Street theatre is a militant theatre of protest. I'm using Savdar's words. These are not my words, right? It's a theatre that goes out amongst the people, where the people live, work, study, whatever it is, and the idea is to try and mobilize the people behind organizations that fight for them. So that's what street theatre is supposed to do. Now, within that, whether you do it with songs or whether you do it without songs, with humor, without humor, with one character, 10 characters, with a set, without a set, how the hell does it matter? What's important, however, is that street theatre, because of the conditions in which it came to be in India, and because it's an active theatre, it's a theatre of anger, it's a theatre of dissent, it's a theatre of protest, and so therefore it can't be trapped in paraphernalia. You can't say, or you should not say that I will not do my play unless you're able to fulfill all of these conditions for me. You know, I need this fancy thing, you know, whatever it is, right? A set or lights or whatever. That my theatre is not slave to all of this, right? My theatre is trying to say something. It's trying to go where the people are. And so therefore it has to be flexible, it has to be highly mobile, it has to be inventive, it has to be entertaining, and of course it has to have
A message.
you know, politics, not message. Message is a word that I'm very uncomfortable with, because everybody is going out there with messages, you know, whatever, wash your hands before you go to, before you eat or something, whatever, you know, that kind of. So, which is important, of course, you should wash your hands before you eat, but that's not what we are into.
Thank you for bringing in the question of space. That what excites me about street theatre the most. That you know, what changes in terms of street theatre always is the street, the space. It's in constant change. You never know where you're going to perform or the kind of space that you're going to perform. So the next question is on the deployment of the space itself, you know, and how do you think the politics of a space is played out in terms of your approach towards the audience? I mean, I'm sure it changes, whatever theatre it is, whatever play you are taking. If you're playing it here, it will be different. And if you're playing it in, let's say, 10 kilometers away from here, it's going to be something else. So how do you all negotiate with that, or how does space work?
Well, at different levels in different ways. Some of it is just a practical thing.
Right.
In other words, you don't want to be where there's a lot of noise. You don't want to be next to a temple or something. If you know that the aarti is going to happen at whatever time and your play is going to happen, you know. So you don't want to be in those sorts of situations. I have nothing against temples. We have often performed in the courtyard of the temple as well, you know, very often. So that's not an issue. But so you know, some of it is just a practical thing. Some of it is, you know, when we go into an area, there are local comrades who say to us, "Comrade, why don't you perform here?" Now they are thinking, why don't you perform here, because they think that that's where they'll get the maximum audience, which is fair enough. It's good thinking. But on the other hand, we say that no, we'd rather not perform here, because what you're doing by performing here is you're blocking up this little alley, and so therefore, even though you might get more audience, this audience is not going to be able to focus on the play if they're, let's move whatever 50 steps ahead, and there, it's a better space to perform. Or sometimes you say, no, we get this wall at the back and that helps us bounce sound off, etc. Those sorts of things. So some of it is just a very practical approach to both the aesthetics and the craft of street theatre, and looking at the convenience of the audience. Very often we say, let's move from here to there because the audience can be in the shade in the summer, for instance, right? Or in the winter they can be in the sun, right? And so on. So some of it is that. Some of it has to do with just being aware of where you are and what it means. Now, for instance, in many bastis, let me give you a concrete example. We perform very often in a place called Kusumpur Pahadi. Kusumpur Pahadi is right next to Vasant Vihar, right? And it's a large slum that's kind of hidden because it's on a little hillock. And you could live your whole life in Vasant Vihar and go to PVR, Priya and whatever else, Modern Bazaar and so on and so forth, and never realize that there's a huge slum which is within stone throwing distance of where you are, not stone throwing, but whatever, you know, a few hundred meters from where you are, because it's hidden from view. And like in a lot of slums, they don't have running water. So therefore, every time we've gone there to perform, and I've performed there for at least 30 years, you know, I personally, myself, I have performed there for 30 years, and Janam has performed for longer, right? Every single time we go there, one of the most important things that one asks every time is, what time is the water going to come? Because there will be those tankers that will come, and they, you know, when the tanker comes, then obviously people need water, right? And so one question is, what time are they going to come? Secondly, where is it going to happen, right? So therefore, oftentimes you want to be close enough to the water spot,
So that people gather and
because
watch.
yeah, because you know, people are going to come there anyway, if you're going to come at the time of the tanker.
Right.
If not, then it doesn't matter. But you don't want to come in their way. That filling water for them is always going to be more important than watching your play,
Certainly.
right? And so therefore there's that kind of a respect and just an awareness, not even, I don't want to make too much of it, just an awareness of this is how it is, and so on. One of the things that you learn very early on in doing street theatre, which is a very nice, it's a nice corrective to whatever ideas you have about, exalted ideas you have about being an artist, is that in street theatre you can be sure that the audience always has something more important to do than watch your play. You know, in most cases they have not chosen to come there.
Yeah.
Most cases, right?
They're stopping by.
They're stopping by. If they find it interesting, they'll watch it. If they don't find it interesting, they'll walk away. You know, they have not made an investment in liking the play. If I buy a ticket for 300 rupees and go and watch a play, I want to like it.
Right.
By paying that money, I've already, you know, then that play has to work really hard for me to not like it. You know, even if it's okay, I'll say, okay, I don't mind spending the money, you know, whatever, right? But in street theatre, that's not the case. Nobody has made a commitment to liking the play. So you have to be good. And by good, I mean at both levels. You have to be artistically strong, you have to be entertaining in the best sense of the word. I don't mean it in a cheap kind of a way. You know, entertainment is, unfortunately, it's overused, the word, on television, etc., etc., whatever. That's not the way in which I mean. But I really mean that the play should hold you, it should hold your attention, it should move you, it should, you know, whatever it is, whatever emotions, you know, it should help you to feel emotions. There's nothing wrong with that. Also, it should make you think. So it should really engage your whole being. You know, if you're laughing, then you should laugh with your body, you know, not just in your head, right? And it has to make you think. So therefore, so you need to be strong in your art, in your craft, and you need to be strong in your politics. You have to be able to have that moment in the play when somebody in the audience says, oh, okay, I hadn't made that connection before. Which should just bring me back to that word message. Oftentimes, people think that, you know, street theatre is out there to give a message to people. It's there to educate people. It's there to, you know, whatever. And so the assumption is that people out there don't know. We know.
Yeah.
Right?
It becomes didactic, yeah.
And, you know, I have nothing against didactic theatre if we mean by that something like what Brecht meant
Yes,
by the didactic theatre.
I meant
right?
something else.
Sure. But so I don't, I really don't have a problem with that. That's a different thing. And that kind of didactic theatre is first and foremost meant to be didactic towards the actor, you know, and then towards everybody else. So the act of doing that play should teach you something, and so on. So it's in that sense that I mean that when you do street theatre, you know, whatever illusions I may have had 30 years ago when I came into Janam, certainly very soon I realized, very soon, within the first few performances, I realized that, street theatre is going to teach me much more than I can ever give back. It's really taught me so much. Every time I go into a basti, into an industrial area, or into whatever it is, in a school, college, whatever, you learn so much about the social conditions. You learn so much about how capitalism is adaptive. It keeps changing all the time. What you saw in a particular factory, let's say 2 years ago, those forms of exploitation have changed. And there's subtle little changes that happen, but it keeps changing all the time. Look at what's happening with caste now. It's something that everybody is thinking about all the time. Look at gender and so on. So there's a lot of churning, there's a lot of change that's taking place in our society at all times, and street theatre has helped me to learn about that in a way that I don't think I would have ever learned if I had not been in street theatre. I would just never have encountered this whole, even if I'd like, for me, for instance, the automatic thing would have been to become an academic, but even that wouldn't have taught me as much as I've learned through street theatre. And it really is something that I'm very grateful for. So it's in that sense that I mean that when we go out there and we do a play, we are not trying to say, we know, you don't know, we are going to tell you. No. I can never pretend to tell a woman in a basti what patriarchy means. She experiences it in a way that I will never experience it in my whole life. Right? Because I'm male, I'm middle class, I'm born into so many privileges. But what is it that I can do? What is it that our theatre can do? Our theatre can create interconnections that people don't always see. In other words, our theatre can help to join the dots. There's one experience that you have here, and there's something else that you see there. And there should be that one moment where somebody in the audience says to herself, oh, I never thought of it like that. That these two are not discrete, distinct, different things. That there's actually something that connects these. These connections is what I really feel that street theatre can make. And not just street theatre. I would say this about any, good theatre, any good art. When I see a good movie, that's what I see, and that's what it does to me. When one reads a good novel, that's what it does to me, right? And so that's really what we try to do when we do street theatre, is really try and link things, try and show how things are structurally connected. That it's not like you change this one little thing and your life is going to be okay. No, it's not. It's probably not going to be okay. It could be that it gets worse, even though this little thing might improve. But and so on, right? So that's really what I feel street theatre does.
Now, I'm going to jump to chronology that I had prepared because now...
That's all right. The audience doesn't know that.
Doesn't know what we have prepared, exactly. So, coming to, because you were talking about interconnections and links, one would, and before that you spoke about certain thematic aspects of caste, of gender, of, one would say, communalism also. How are themes selected or chosen for Janam Trace? How do you decide that, okay, this is what we are going to work on next? I guess there are certain very important issues in hand that happens constantly, that's continuously happening. And history gives you so much every day that you can take up things. But other than that, how does it work? How do you all decide, or how does it?
Well, some of it, as you said, is something that is just the exigencies of being an alive human being. Really, that's what it is. We were in Hyderabad on the day that Rohit Vemula committed suicide. And in fact, that evening we were performing, And the next morning we were supposed to perform at Hyderabad Central University, and Rohit would have been one of the organizers of that performance. And of course the performance didn't happen because there was too much tension on campus and so on and so forth. But immediately, the moment we heard the news, I still remember this, we were in performance and I wasn't acting in that scene, so somebody came and said to me, maybe our performance tomorrow morning is not happening. I said, why? And they said, there's a Dalit student who's committed suicide. And the moment I heard that, I said, oh my God, I didn't know Rohit Vemula, I had no idea who he was, etc. But then there are those moments when you feel that, oh, this is going to be important, there's something moves inside you, and then of course we were very moved by the fact of his death, but also equally moved by the letter that he left behind. And that letter, very soon was available on the internet and so on. And I remember we were in Hyderabad, we were performing and so on, and I was reading that letter on the internet, and I read out sections of it to other people in the group, and we said, my God, what a terrible, terrible situation this is. On the one side, you feel for Rohit, and you feel for his family, and you feel for everything. On the other side, you say, look at this young man. What did he want? He wanted to be a writer of science. How beautiful is that? How much talent must he have had to have been able to reach where he did, fighting the whole institutional structure that is waged against him, So therefore there are moments when something just moves you very deeply, and then you want to do something not because it's a hot news or anything, but just because it's a need for you. You feel that, I have to respond to this, we have to respond to this. We have to do something that is going to be a creative response to something very terrible. But also, equally, one wants to respond to not just something terrible, which is of course the case, but also Rohit Vemula's death has ignited so much as well, has inspired so much, and one wants to be part of that as well. And so therefore, soon after his death, we have done a short performance called The Last Letter. And this is a performance which is, it just literally all that the performance does is it takes the text of his last letter, and there's an actor who just reads it out. And this text is interspersed with some very powerful poetry on the one side, and on the other side it's interspersed with some other letters. Some of these letters are the ones written by the Ministry of by the Education Ministry to the university, saying, what have you done about this?
So all
the labor, Bandaru Dattatray's letter. So his first letter and all the responses to, all that. And it just shows you how much within the current dispensation, at the central government level, this is the Minister of Labor. I mean, the irony of it is just, it's just shocking that the Minister of Labor is going after this young, bright, very talented Dalit student who wants to be a scientist. How, oh God, it's terrible. So it's that. And all that the performance does is really just intersperses and juxtaposes texts. There's no playing out of any situation. It's a short 13-minute sort of a performance. And the text of his letter is used as it is in English. And that's also a conscious choice that we made. We decided to do it in English because there's letters in English. And there's a certain politics there as well, and so on. And we wanted to be sort of sensitive to that, and so on. So sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's you just have to do something. History forces you, and so on. In other cases, one decides to do something because you know that something is happening in your city. Maybe it's a big strike that's going to take place, maybe it's some other big campaign and it's an issue that's close to you. You feel that yes, we'd like to contribute to this campaign through a play. Sometimes it's neither of these. Sometimes it's just that you feel, that okay, we have done X number of plays on a certain theme, let's say gender, suppose. So one is that we've done so many plays on gender. Secondly, in almost all our plays, there's also a gendered view of society, and that's something that we work very consciously to bring in. So there's all of that. But you feel that, now after having done we've done so many plays over so many years, whatever, but things have changed now. There's something new in society that hasn't been captured by any of our plays. So therefore, let's try and do a play that captures this aspect of the reality, So it's not because of any immediate pressing emotional or, some political need or anything of that kind, but it's just something that the gender has been important to Janam, always. We've always worked very hard in trying to understand the whole gender issue. Patriarchy is something that we feel very strongly about, and we feel that okay, now here's something that's lacking, so let's try and fill that gap, which is also a creative challenge for you. How do you find a language in which you can say something that's meaningful, that makes connection, etc., etc. So all of these are different ways in which you decide to do plays.
So where would Janam prefer to play the last letter?
We've been doing
areas?
We've been doing it essentially among students.
No, I was just curious because there is a context to it. And,
Absolutely.
The language, as you say, it plays the politics also. So that was the reason I asked where.
I mean, personally, I would be open to doing it in Bastis also, and maybe for doing it in Bastis, we might need to translate the letter into Hindi. That's also something that one is open to completely. Now having done it in English, it's fine. Now we can translate. The only thing about playing in Bastis is that the kind of performance it is, and the situation that you're trying to point towards, there's a certain gravity to it. There's a certain seriousness to it. You don't want audiences who would not be able to stay with it, and that's a very practical thing. In other words, I believe that if you're able to create conditions where audiences are able to see something comfortably, they will stay with it. But oftentimes when you go to Bastis, those conditions don't exist. Right. Where will you find a place where audiences can sit at peace and be able to listen to each word, because there's no action. There's nothing happening in the play. There's just 3 actors sitting or standing and saying lines. So those lines are important. Every word is important. It has to be heard clearly. Unlike a lot of our other street theatre, which is very physical, which can be over the top, you miss 3 lines at one time, it doesn't matter. People will still figure out what's happening. In this, it's not like that. So if we were able to create the conditions where people can sit aram se, not be disturbed, not, you don't have a dog walking through, you don't have some, motorcycle wala trying to force his way through, etc. All of these are things that we take in our stride when we are doing street theatre. Not a big deal. Theek hai. But in this performance, you can't. You really can't. You want that attention, and you want people to be totally focused on what's happening, because it requires that. as well as in some other in other places where there are no students, but it's basically you know
A mix of
an audience that understands English
exactly.
at a basic level, you know. And it's amazing. It really is amazing how much. I mean, it's a very moving performance. I don't act in it, but every time I've seen the performance, I'm just literally I'm moved. I don't know how to say it. Not saddened. I'm just moved. Yeah. And I think by and large that's how people have responded to it. In schools in particular, it's been something that has led to a lot of discussion and so on. And in schools in particular, our point has been not to say that we are the ones who have the answers, so we are going to lead the discussion. No, what we try and say to the school is you must have at least one teacher who can be there and who can handle this discussion. We'll say what we want to say, of course, but the follow-up has to be done with teachers. They are the ones who are going to be there all the time. We are going to do one performance and go away. So it's really important to have that. And at that stage of one's life, one is in class 9, 10, 11, that's roughly mid to late teens. That's the best time to raise these questions, but it's also the time that you need somebody who can help you make sense of it,
Answer those things.
Yeah, you have many questions and maybe that person doesn't have answers, but maybe that person can help you, can help you connect, can help you frame it in certain ways that makes sense to you, So yeah.
So, do you think that after having spoken to you for quite some time now, do you think that street theatre in a way opens up a directly democratic and a participatory space, a participatory political space?
Absolutely.
If I may say so. And do you think that audience reacts then and there? And I don't mean that Janam has a purpose of performance, but one can even think that why are you going to such and such place or performing such and such play? So let's not call it purpose, but let's say there is an intention why this play is being performed in front of them. Do you think that people participate then and there and you'll get that response? And does it work out? If you could just give examples like you have been talking about various plays of Jagannath Manch.
Well, let me give you the first example is of myself as a spectator from before the time that I came into Janam. I had no idea what this group was.
Then you also must talk about your association, because as you're starting from there.
Well, that's not so important.
That
But I remember one of the first times that I saw Janam was my father used to teach in the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and my mother was a women's activist. My sister was also an activist in the students' movement and so on. So I kind of, it was there in the air and in the family and so on. So I went to watch a performance by Janam, and I remember the play that happened was Aurat.
Yeah.
Now of course I know the play very, very well because I acted in it many times. I've studied the play quite seriously as form and so on and so forth. But the first time I saw the play, oh my God, it was electrifying what it did to me. And I was in school, I must have been in class 11 or something. But I saw this play and I said, oh my God, what a tight little thing it is. It's about 25 minutes of dense, highly entertaining, beautifully acted, situations. And in particular, I remember what it was to see Maloishri, Mala, in performance. And I think that meant more to me than the text of the play. You know, the effect that she had on me as a performer, the fact of her performance. Uh, she was just so powerful, you know, she was extraordinary. I had never seen an actor like that in my life. She just blew my mind. I said, oh my God. And I always fancied myself as an actor. You know, I always acted in school plays and all that, you know. So I was really fond of acting. And I said, oh my God, I will never be able to do anything like what this woman is doing. My God. And I can now imagine but if I had been a woman, let's say, the effect that would have had on me would have been maybe even more. To see such a powerful woman, it affected me in many ways. And so just the power of this woman was something that was just incredible. Incredible. The way she raised the red flag at the end, it still gives me goosebumps to think of it. Subsequently, I acted in that play at least a few hundred times with Mala. And every single time that Mala raised that red flag at the end of it, and the way it went zoop like that, you know, it gave me goosebumps. Because it just brought extraordinary. So I think that's the kind of power that theatre can have. It can move you in ways that you can't articulate. You don't fully understand what it's doing to you. And how long that can stay with you is also something that you just never know. We've all, you know, and that's about art. It's not just about street theatre, but I'm saying that there's a story that you've read as a kid, you know, that comes back to you 30 years later and you say, oh my God, you know, whatever, right? Some movie that you've seen, some images just stay with you forever. You forget what the movie was about. You forget the story, you forget the characters, etc. There's that some image that just stays with you forever. Paintings and so on and so forth. And the best art does that. So I believe that sometimes, unfortunately not always, though we keep trying, but sometimes in street theatre one is able to create those moments where something stays with people for a long time, and what that is very hard to articulate. That's at one level. At another level, obviously I've kind of spoken about this earlier, which is that it you know, good street theatre has the ability to show you reality in a way that you had not seen it before.
Explain that.
Which is to say that it's a reality that you might well have experienced. So it's not like you're a stranger to this reality. You know that reality. You've experienced it. You know. But you haven't, you just haven't seen it in that light before.
So you have never been an audience to the reality. You have always been a participant to it.
That's right. That's right. And then for that one moment where a spectator is able to suddenly step, in a sense, outside of themselves and say, oh, this is what happened to me. Wow, I didn't realize. You know, there's that moment. And very often people are not able to articulate that very well. That's fine. That's okay. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that I do believe that that street theatre can't operate on its own. It doesn't happen in a void. Street theatre is very much a part of a larger movement for social change. And so when we go out and perform, we are very clear that we are always working with organizations and individuals and whoever else it is who are trying to do something at the ground level. You know, working with workers, women, students, whatever it is. Right. Sometimes it's just a school teacher, as I said, one singular teacher, that's fine, but there's somebody there who can follow up. And the point is, if you go and perform alongside an organization, then is that organization being benefited from your performance or not? And it's not an unfair question to ask. It is a fair question to ask. That if we say that street theatre is a militant theatre of protest, it mobilizes the struggling people behind fighting organizations. So then this connection has to happen, no? And somewhere street theatre has to play a catalytic role or an enabling role for that to happen. The third thing is, or the fourth or fifth or whatever it is, that street theatre keeps alive exactly what you said, the spirit of a public discussion. And particularly in the times that we are living in now, but not just these times, from always, but it becomes even more important today. When any idea that is an alternative idea is immediately branded, you're anti-national, you're anti-Hindu, you're anti-this, you're anti-that. Are, ye kya tarika hua bhi? Yeah? And then you start throwing people out of colleges, you stop their scholarships, you go and barge into somebody's house and you open their fridge and then you find some meat and you kill them. And there's so much hatred. And all of this is driven by a very right-wing, fascist kind of an agenda, right? It's not that people have suddenly become mad.
No, and in some way it's very organized also.
Of course it is. But in this kind of a situation, there are always a large number of people who might feel this way, who might feel that way, but who are not ideologically or programmatically committed to fascism, right? They might not share your views, that's fine, no problem. But the point always is that if there's somebody who watches a play by Janam and comes to us and says later, oh, I think you're very biased, you're not showing the other side of the picture, what would our response be? Would our response be to say, no, you're wrong, what we are showing is the truth? No. What your response should be is to say that yes, you're right, we are biased. Of course we are biased. Of course we are partisan. Of course we are not showing you both sides as if both sides are equal somehow. No, we are not doing that. We are doing that, we are saying what we believe. And we are partisan. You might not agree with what we believe, that's fine. Let's talk about it. You have a view, we have a view, let's talk about it. There's no reason for us to attack each other. There's no reason for us to break each other's heads. There's no reason for us to call each other anti-national and whatever else. There's no reason. Let's have a civilized conversation. And my experience at least has been, over the last 30 years I've been in Janam, my experience has been that there has never been an instance, not a single instance in all the 8,500 performances we've done. Across the country, we've gone to now something like 200 towns and villages across the country. There's almost no part of the country that we have not performed in. Never have I encountered a situation where somebody has seen a play and after that has come and said, no, I will not allow you to do one more performance. I'm stopping the play now. Never. People, of course, they come up to you and they say, no, we don't agree with you, we think that you're wrong, we think that you're anti this, you're anti that, whatever it is. Fine, that's fine. The people who stop your performance or who try to stop your performance through physical attacks, intimidation, official means, whatever it is, they have never seen your play. And they never do. What they're objecting to is the fact of the play. The very act of it, the context of it. How dare you come and perform for workers? How dare you come and perform for women? Marginalized group, whatever it is, right? That's what they're objecting to. How dare you come and speak alongside these organizations that are fighting? How dare you lend your voice to their struggle? How dare you do that? That's what their objection is to. That's how attacks happen. They don't watch a play and then attack you. I wish they did.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish they watched the play. If they actually watched your play, they wouldn't. They probably wouldn't. I don't know. It's never happened to me, is all I'm saying. In Janam, it has never happened. So, it is really, really important to keep alive this democratic and public debate in the open. It's not happening behind closed doors. It's not. Of course, it should happen in classrooms. It should happen in people's homes, etc., etc. All that is important, but it should also happen on the streets.
Absolutely.
It has to happen there. Democracy is not something that is once written into the constitution and then is played out every 5 years for that 1 hour that you go and vote. No, democracy is made every single day on the streets. And if you are not going to help that process, then why are you doing theatre? Right? And I do believe that street theatre has a huge role to play in this. It's a role that's not often fully appreciated. I think it's underappreciated, this aspect of street theatre.
Yes, and if I may say so, I think the form is often taken to be in a more simplified manner.
Yeah.
Because I guess there are many NGOs, there are many self-help groups who just want to take up, I'll use the word which I don't like using, very
Absolutely.
issue-based plays.
Absolutely.
So it might be some hygiene thing, it might be against AIDS, it might be against good sanitation of the area. So I think in that way also.
Yeah, they do a play because they can't afford a television spot.
Exactly.
It becomes a substitute for something else.
It's more propaganda.
It's completely that.
Yeah.
It's just an advertisement actually. It's social awareness advertising being done by an NGO and whatever it is. That's not theatre that excites me at all. I don't even think it's particularly theatre.
Exactly, yeah, it's not.
So that's not what is exciting to me. What is exciting to me is, in particular, what's exciting to me is when there are marginalized groups who face oppression in certain ways, certain very particular ways that they understand the best, and they want to fight this, and they want to fight it, of course, economically, socially, politically, whatever, all that, but also culturally, also at the level of ideas, and they take to street theatre. And some of the finest street theatre I've seen has been by groups like that. Very powerful, because you see that there's a lived experience here which I would never have. I just would not ever have. Plus, they also have, it's not just an experience in terms of, let's say, oppression, but it's also a cultural expression of that experience, which is not how my mind would think. You speak in the language that you know, right? If I've never lived in a village, and if I've never encountered, let's say, Kabir Das being sung under a tree in a village, then that's not what is going to come to my mind. That's not my natural expression, right? Whereas people who have experienced that is their natural experience, expression. And so they will speak in their language. And there's a wide variety of languages. I just don't mean linguistic languages. What I mean is, performative languages in this country. There's a wide variety, and some of the fun of street theatre is precisely that it helps people to express themselves in a way that's very open, that's very powerful, that doesn't have any institutional barriers to entry. You could do Bharatnatyam as well, but there is an institutional barrier which you have to acknowledge. It is true, it is real. Street theatre, there is no institutional barrier.
That brings to the next thing that I wanted to talk about is, do you think street theatre is gestural? By gestural I mean, because you were talking about expressions and languages of performance, by gestural I mean what Brecht had meant, that epic theatre is gestural. And so I read you somewhere, I'm quoting you, you said any good or enlightened street theatre group will build upon the cultural traditions of the area and its forms of expression. I thought it's very important uh, claim. So, do you think these? I'm sure it changes. The form of expression changes every time, as we spoke, we perform. And Janam being a city-based group, how does it work in the rural areas when you are taking your place there? How are you relating to those cultural traditions? As you said, that you never grew up with Kabir, so you really don't, that's not your point of reference. So you're going all over India, you're going to various places. So how do you relate to that? And do you think by gesture we'll come back to it?
Well, I mean, the fact is that Janam is a very urban group, and not just urban, we are a very Delhi group.
Right.
We actually don't travel as much as people assume that we travel. You know, in a year we may have 1 or 2 trips outside Delhi for maybe 4 or 5 days total, maybe a week in total. So, hundreds of performances in Delhi. That's what we do in and around Delhi. So, Delhi, Ghaziabad, you know, whatever, Noida, Gurgaon. That's our that's what we do. And so, therefore, how we express ourselves is what we have grown up with, what's our natural expression, but also is the expression that people in Delhi would understand and react to quite easily. So, yeah, I mean, I have no illusions about this. The fact is that if we go into a deep interior area and perform our play, it doesn't work very well. It doesn't. In the first place, there's just the question of time. Before the audience in a rural area comes, sits down, settles down, you know, figures out that something is happening, the play is over. 13 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. That just goes in a blink in the village. They want you to perform for 2 hours, 3 hours. We just don't have those plays. We can't perform for 3 hours, even if we wanted to, you know. So we just don't have it. So therefore it's true that most times, I mean, it hasn't happened very much that we have performed in deep rural areas, but oftentimes when we have performed, we find that it, you know, people appreciate it. Are, you know, शहर से आए हैं, whatever it is, you know. They've come this far, they've come to our village, there's a certain hospitality that audiences always have, they appreciate that, and so on. But the play doesn't really work. No.
So, this is Janam caters to people, or street theatre caters to people. So, Janam has a core group of members. You all decide, you all choose a theme, you all write a play, and then go ahead and perform it. So, is it possible that, like, the question is, can street theatre be by the people also, instead of being for the people? Or not instead, let's say, yeah.
Of course. As I said to you, some of the best street theatre I've seen has been by groups like that. Once I remember years ago, I saw this street play by a group from what was then Andhra Pradesh. I don't know whether it was Telangana or Andhra or whatever it is, but in Telugu. And this was by a community, I forget the name of that community, but basically they were a kind of a wandering, nomadic kind, slightly gypsy kind of, nomadic kind of, you know, that kind of a community. And the particular issue of the play was interesting for me because I had never made that connection in my head. This was about people coming to this community and buying children from there. And then going abroad with those children. And I just never thought that would, you know, one knew that it happened in cities, but I never thought that would happen there. And the play that I saw, it had this just extraordinary sequence in it, where there's this one woman, and I mean, the references were so amazing because they had that that the actual community goes with these carts, like bullock carts, right? And so when they reach a place, they stop there, and then the bullock cart itself becomes their home, kind of a thing. So they sleep under it and so on, whatever. Beautiful. And so two of the actors became the bullock cart, and this woman becomes the one who is pulling the.
Gives me the idea of courage.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I can see Mother Courage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these are actors who had never heard of Brecht. These are actors who had never seen Mother Courage and her children, had no experience of that. But the image was perfect. It was right out of Brecht. And what happened was that as she moves around the acting area, she's singing. And she's singing a beautiful, soulful song that I didn't understand the words of, but it was beautiful. And what I could gather is that as she's walking, her pregnancy is growing. And at the end of 9 months, she delivers the child, And oh my God, it was just the most extraordinary experience to see that woman. She was amazing. And what strength and what poise and what power she had in her body. And how she pushed the bullock cart, and simultaneously, her belly swelled, which you could see all of it happening. My God, you could see everything. And then at the end of it, she let go of it and came to the center, and then she delivered her child. And you could see that child. Oh, it was the most extraordinary. You could hear the child scream, And there's nothing there. There's nothing. There's just this woman who's a completely untrained actor. Right? But there's something that she's being able to summon through her experience that goes beyond all training. It's incredible. Now, the song that she was singing is from the community. It's not something that she wrote.
Exactly.
Right? It's their experience and their expression. The clothes that she was wearing, beautiful, with little mirrors and beautiful. So I just looked at that and I went, wow, oh my God. I mean, what would people not give to be able to see a performance like this? But it's also something, as I was watching it, I was saying to myself, this is something that we would never be able to do, not in 1,000 years.
But I don't think there's a necessity also.
Of course,
There isn't a necessity.
Of course.
Because that's
Absolutely.
something, the need is something else, the
Absolutely.
demands are something
Absolutely.
else. And I think Jalam is more concerned about the organized workers of the city. I mean, there has to be, I'm making this differentiation because as when I was talking with Monashri, I remember she says that whatever of IPT lives today, I think we take it forward. And
well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure she meant to say that that we see ourselves
as a part of,
as the carriers of that legacy. We are not the only ones.
not the only one, certainly. Not
There
the
are
only
lots
ones.
of groups
Absolutely.
like that, and
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm literally quoting Moleshri, so
Yeah.
it's not like I'm putting words in her mouth.
Right.
But yeah, so she's absolutely right, of course.
Yeah. So another thing is now coming to a very different aspect on rather the technical aspects of street theatre is how does the script of a street theatre develops? How does it develop? I'm just asking for the convenience of the listeners because they also would want to know, I'm sure. And is it so that, is it different? Let me put it that way, would be rather interesting. Is it different from that of the proscenium?
There are no rules here, there's nothing. I mean, we've done plays in which, pretty much the whole script was written by somebody or by two people, whatever, and then we've done plays in which there was no script till many performances. I mean, there was a script, but it was never written down. You know, the script was all in people's heads. And then only after a few performances, when it settled down, that's when the script got written out. Then there are other plays which are kind of, which have this very interesting relationship between writing and improvising. So there's something that the writer writes, and you take that material and you go onto the floor, you improvise with that material, and then the actors make something of it, and then it goes back to the writer. Or you come with an idea on the floor and you give it to the actors, and then they start playing around with it. Something comes out of that and you say, oh wow, I'd never have thought of that. Wow. And so then that little idea gets picked out from this much larger improvisation, and then that goes to the writer, and who may also have been part of that improvisation. So but so there's no single way of doing it.
Right. But I think it's more open in the sense that you can always revisit it, and
You can revisit it. It's also, I should just add, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but I should also add that no matter how you do it, it's always very collaborative. So there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of responses that people give to what's happening. Sometimes those responses are not vocal, sometimes they're on the floor. Actors have a way of responding to a text on the floor, which you have to be, as the director or writer, you have to be trained to catch that response and understand what that means. There's also, I should also say that none of our plays are unresearched. There's a hell of a lot of research that goes into something that at the end of it you look at that play and you say, oh, this is so simple. This is, it looks so easy. And of course, it should be. It should be simple. It should look very easy. It should be something that almost hides its own craft. And it should be something that distills a very complex world and a very complex set of interconnections into something that's a simple expression. So there's always this dialectic between complexity and simplicity. And having a simple expression is not being simplistic. That's a way of thinking, that you just reduce everything to some simple formula. No, that's not what we are talking about. What we are talking about is how do you translate a complex reality and the interconnections of this complex reality into an expression that is simple.
Yeah, I think that works very well, because I remember watching as a child street theatres on GAT, and then I had no idea what the hell it was. And then things, even very structured, codified political, terms, ideologies, even become more. I think that's what you wanted to say. So, how are compositions thought of? Because you don't know the space, you don't have a stage. So, how is it actually drawn? How you think?
Well, I can tell you what I do as a director.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, this may not be how other people work.
No,
But how I work as a director and how I've kind of figured it out in my own head now after so many years of working is that I feel that it's really important, precisely because everything is going to change when you go into an area. Nothing is going to remain exactly the way it was in rehearsal. So it's really important to fix it as much as you can in rehearsal. That unless you have something that is really, really well rehearsed, you'll never be able to change it. Because you don't know what you're changing if it's not fixed. If everything is fluid, then everything is fluid. There's nothing to change. It is fluid. It just is fluid. No. You should fix everything perfectly. Imagining ideal conditions. And then when you go out and perform, you're able to change things because you have a certain fixed benchmark in your head. Now, what do I mean by this? What I mean by this is, typically when you do street theatre as an actor, I can tell you that it's very important to project. Very important to be able to really reach way, at the back. Now, sometimes you end up in performance conditions that are very conducive to performing. Suppose you go to factory where you're performing inside, or you go to a school where you're performing indoors, and students are there and teachers are there, so they're going to be, it's not going to be that kind of crazy ruckus. There's not any traffic sound or,
You're more
temple
sheltered
bells,
and
whatever. Now, at that point, because you have a certain graph in your head of how your voice goes up and down, right? Now, if you know that at this point I hit this pitch and I go so loud normally, I know that I've practiced it, I've rehearsed it. Now here I know it would become too much if I do that. So therefore I still have to project, but I should not hit that pitch.
So you need to modulate also.
I need to modulate, I need to bring it down. Sometimes I'm able to hold silences for longer. But what is that longer? That longer is because there is a silence there, and that is in rehearsal it's fixed. Hold it for this long. Now you can change it, this long can become this long in performance because there is a fixed thing already. And I think that one of the big mistakes that especially young actors make is that they feel that street theatre, everything is flexible, everything is fluid. Of course it is fluid. Of course it is fluid. But it's a bit like saying, I have no training in Hindustani classical music. Right? I have no training at all. I can't sing to save my life. If I were to start singing right now some notion of Hindustani classical music and say, I'm inventing a raga, is that going to work? No, it's not. It's not. Right? Or I'm going to improvise in some raga. I can't improvise because there's nothing fixed. I don't know what the fixed is. I don't know what notes are to be used and what notes are not to be used in this raga. I can't tell you. So I will never be able to improvise. It's like that. It's only when you know what is fixed, only then can you improvise. And this training, this rigor is something that I often find as a director I'm saying to you, and as an actor I'm saying to you. I often find that you have to really struggle to be able to bring this point across to actors, because they feel, how does it matter? These are lines that this guy has written. I can ask him to change those lines. Yes, you can, but why? Is there a reason why you're changing that line? No, just because you feel like that today? No, that's not a good enough reason. You give me a good reason, we'll change it, sure. Right? But if not, stick to those lines, because you might have to change it in performance, but you'll never know what you're changing unless something is fixed.
So does it help always, I don't know, I'm just asking you, do you perceive of a space always as a circular?
No.
When you are?
No, not always, not always. Some of our plays are conceived in the circular space. Some of our plays are conceived in a three-sided space.
Right.
But never do we conceive a play in a one-sided audience space. In the conception of it.
In the conception of it. No.
When you have a three-sided audience, conception, then it's very easy to transfer it to a one-sided or even a two-sided audience. Or a four-sided audience, very easy to transform that into anything. Very easy. Not hard at all. Actors just need to know the basic rules of how you use space. If they're aware of those rules and if they're smart, if they have their eyes open, they can change in a second. It takes nothing. But if you only have one-sided conception and actors who are only used to working on the stage, they just go bonkers. They don't understand how to work in a circular acting area. It's just crazy because there's people everywhere. Which is my upstage, which is my downstage, which is my stage left, stage right.
Exactly.
Face the audience. How do I face the audience? The audience is everywhere. It just completely messes with your head. And so you need to do exercises, you need to train actors on this 360-degree sort of relationship to the space and to the audience. It's fun.
That's very interesting. Last question possibly. Do you think street theatre in India needs documentation, or is it necessary at all to document it?
I mean, necessary or not, I don't know. Meaning that, if you ask me in a historical kind of a context, I would say, see, I was trained as a historian in my previous birth.
Yeah, in your previous avatar.
Yeah. So I would always say, yes, of course it should be documented because there's a historical record.
Right.
And there's enough street theatre happening in the country for you to say that this is a significant thing that is happening. The activity is really quite widespread, so therefore, of course, it should be documented. But on the other hand, as an actor and director and as a maker of street theatre, I always struggle with this. Personally, I struggle with this. How many pictures should you take? How many times should you video shoot? We are very bad at it. We don't do it enough. In fact, just the other day we were talking about it and saying, you go to YouTube and you check for Jannatimman, there's hardly anything there. If you look at the body of our work and you see what's there on YouTube, there's nothing. It's not even 1%, it's not even nothing. And very often it's been uploaded by other people, not by us. Very often it's performances that are not very exciting to look at. That's not what really represents us, but that's the reality of it. Now, if you're going to be doing everything yourself, then, some things will slip through the net, sure. But yes, I think it needs to be documented. I think that there's, now one knows over the last several years, at least over the last decade or so, and maybe more, but every single year we get at least 3 or 4 researchers who come to us saying, I'm doing my MPhil, I'm doing my PhD, I'm working on street theatre, on whatever, on Safdar Hashmi, on Jannatimman, whatever it is, right? On women's theatre in Delhi in the 1970s, whatever. That's great. There's a lot of academic research now, academic interest in this form and in the history of this form. Unfortunately, very often we don't have enough material to give them because they start asking us, do you have performance records? And we say, okay, sorry, we don't. Do you have pictures of, this performance you're just talking about? Do you have a picture of that performance? And I say, no, we don't. How many pictures do we have of any of our early plays? Very little, very few. Janam was lucky that we had a couple of people who were very good photographers. So for a few years in between, we have a beautiful photographic record of our work, beautiful pictures taken by Surendra Rajan and Ratan Das. Ratan Das was an actor in the group, he's now a journalist, he's a senior journalist. Surendra Rajan was just a maverick photographer, designer, artist, actor, all sorts of things. He's now in Bombay. And so he went around with us to some tours and took pictures. Ratin, whenever he traveled with the group, he took pictures. But before and after that, there are huge gaps in just the photographic record. Forget about other record, And then, of course, there are so many stories, so many experiences which are there with people. They haven't been systematically recorded. They haven't been systematically, So something comes out because I'm speaking to you right now, so something comes out, that's how it is. But that's the nature of the beast. What can one do?
Thank you so much. It was
Well, thanks.